Today we're going to be making a larkspur along with the stem of leaves. We'll be using these crepe paper colors I have set here in double-sided white for our petals, an extra fine vanilla, heavy nectarine, and extra fine and cypress. We're going to get started by making our stamen. So we have between 5 and 7 flowers per stem. So you should get about 5 stamen out of each strip of crepe paper. So we're going to start by stretching out the strips. So we have this is the stamen piece here and this is the pollen. So go ahead and stretch each piece out all the way. The pollen piece, because it is heavy crepe paper, is going to stretch out a lot more than the stamen, being that it's extra fine. And then we're going to go ahead and trim the pollen so that it's the same length as your stamen. And then we're going to go ahead and take our white glue and we will apply it to the lower half of our pollen strip. Just cover that lower half with glue. All right, then we're going to go ahead and lay our stamen strip on top of the glue, getting it as straight as you can. And then I'm going to go ahead and apply white glue to the top half of the pollen. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and fold the pollen over the top of the stamen. So my ends are still a little bit off. I'm going to go ahead and trim those so they're even. All right, then I'm going to go ahead and fold this in half. And I'm going to place this into my fringe clip. I'm only holding on to it with the fringe clip so that about less than like 1/8 of an inch is sitting in my fringe clip. And I'm going to take my detail scissors and we're going to go ahead and fringe. So first I'm going to go ahead and cut along the fold. And then I'm going to go ahead and fringe all the way down to my fringe clip. Next, we're going to remove the stamen from the fringe clip and unfold it. The pollen and stamen may be a little bit stuck together because of the glue, but just very gently pull it apart. Next, I'm going to put a small section back into the fringe clip. I'm going to go ahead and roll the pollen between my fingers. And this will help just smooth everything out. Roll it all up nice and tight so you don't have any corners. Once you've rolled the first section, you can go ahead and move the fringe clip down and continue rolling. Then you can remove it from the fringe clip. Next, we're going to cut these into small 1/2-inch sections. So I just like to eyeball it. You can use a ruler or say your cutting mat that has a ruler on it. So I was able to get 8 stamen pieces out of that strip, so that's enough for 8 flowers. And next we're going to start coloring our petals. So we're going to be using this nice purple PanPastel. I'm going to be using this small brush to apply color to the petals. Whenever I'm using PanPastel, I like to apply it on a paper towel to help catch any of the excess powder. So we'll go ahead and take our petals here. I'm going to grab a little bit of powder and then dust some of the excess off. And I'm going to focus the color at the top of the petal, blending it down and leaving a little bit of the white showing at the base of the petal. So this petal, as you can see, has a small tail at the end of it. And I'm going to add some color to the very tip of the tail, focusing the color there and bringing it up so that there's still some white showing in the center of my petal. And then I'll flip the petal over and color it the exact same way on the other side. We're going to repeat this coloring method with all of our petals as well as the bud petals. All right, next we're going to color this center petal. So it's a bit of a different shape, so we're actually going to knock a bit of the color off of this brush, and we just want to shade this entire petal a very, very light purple. So as you can see, it's just very lightly colored. Next we have our bud petals. They're the exact same shapes as our regular petals, and we're going to color them the same way, just focusing the color right at the tip of the petal and leaving the base white. Right now I'm coloring petals for a second flower. We're going to want to make 5 to 7 flowers per stem. That number is totally adjustable. You can make your stem as tall as you want. Larkspur are kind of like stalk flowers, so they can end up being very tall. However, some of them only have maybe 3 or 4 flowers on the stem. Okay, next we're going to go ahead and shape our petals. We're going to start with the bud petals. For these, all you're going to do is cup the center of each. Just stretch it between your thumbs. You could also use a small steel ball tool, kind of just stretch it over the ball. I find this to be a bit easier with these small petal sizes. To shape the flower petals, we're taking the smallest ball tool. We're going to place it at the very bottom of the petal underneath. I'm placing my finger on top of the ball. So the petal is between the ball and my finger. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it all the way up to the tip of the petal. And this is going to make almost like an indented line straight up the center of the petal. You might have to do it a couple of times, but now you can see there's a nice line crease up the center of your petal. And we're going to do that with every petal shape except for the center petal, which is this one here. Okay, for our center petal here, we're going to use, so we have the really small ball at one end, and then there's a slightly larger one at the other end. We're going to go ahead and use this slightly larger one. And at the widest part of the petal here, we're going to place the ball there and stretch the petal over the ball, only right in that section. So it's just going to form a really deep cup. And we're going to do it on both sides of the petal. Looks just like that. I'm going to go ahead and repeat this with my second set of petals. Alright, I'm all done shaping my petals. I'm going to go ahead and take a couple stamen pieces because I'm going to make 2 flowers for you today on camera. Make sure those stamen are twisted really well and separated. Alright, I'm going to take a 24 gauge wire, and then I'm going to apply white glue to the base of the stamen here, and then glue it around this wire. Do that with my second stamen as well. I'm attaching these to, so this is a 24 gauge wire, and I've left it at its full length of 12 inches long. So each flower will be on its own 12-inch wire. Next, go ahead and grab all of your petals. So you should have your center petal, your top petal that has the small tail on the end. These 4 petals that are all the same shape, but 2 of them are slightly skinnier. And then you have 2 that are a little bit wider. So you're going to take the 2 wide ones are going to rest on either side of the center petal, and then the 2 smaller ones will be at the bottom. So your flower will be arranged just about like this. First, we're going to take the center petal. I'm going to apply glue to the base of it. And then those cupped areas of the petal on either side are going to cup around the stamen. We need to adjust them a little bit so that they're really hugging the stamen. All right, next we're going to take the 2 side petals here, so they're the slightly larger ones. Apply glue to the base of the petal, and I'm gluing it to the side of that center petal. And then I will glue the other one directly across from it. I like to make sure you pinch the base of the petals around the wires. Next, we're gonna go ahead and add this top petal here with the little tail. I'm gonna kind of bend the tail back. I'm gonna apply glue to the base of the petal right where the tail starts. And then I'm gonna go ahead and glue this on one side between the 2 petals you just added. And kind of pinch it around at the base, around the wire. Next, we're going to go ahead and add these 2 bottom petals. So I'm applying glue to the base of them. I'm going to go ahead and add both petals just in this gap between the 2 side petals, directly across from that top petal with the tail. So these 2 bottom petals should kind of overlap each other and fill that gap. This is what the flower looks like when it's still closed. So I'm going to set it aside to let that glue really dry and tack up before I spread the petals out. I'm going to go ahead and add the petals to my second flower. Starting with my center petal, adding glue. Making sure that the center petal is really cupping around, not hugging those stamen. And I'm going to take the 2 side petals. It's really helpful to kind of arrange your petals on the table in the placement that they'll be in. So taking those side petals, adding some glue, and attaching them to either side of the center petal. Next, taking the top petal, and then the 2 bottom petals. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and set this flower aside to dry, and we'll make a couple buds. You're gonna make the buds on a 24 gauge wire as well. Leave each bud wire full length at 12 inches. And you just need 2 bud petals per bud. So I have a variety of sizes here. I have 1 petal that has the little tail on it that I'm going to use, and then my other bud is just going to be 2 normal petals. So for the bud petal with the tail, I'm taking the smaller petal without the tail first, applying some glue up to about the midway point on the petal. and then I'm going to kind of wrap it around the tip so that it kind of rolls around itself. So as you can see, the petals kind of rolled around itself and around the wire. All right, next we're going to go ahead and add on the second petal. So this is, I'm using the one with the little tail. Adding a little bit of glue between the tail and the petal, and just a tiny bit up either side of the petal. Then I'm going to go ahead and wrap the petal around the other one, but much looser. To pinch it around the wire, and then you can go ahead and pull the tail out a bit, like that. To finish the bud, you're going to go ahead and wrap. Use a little bit of the Cypress crepe paper as a stem wrap. Start at the base of the bud and then just wrap about 2 inches down. I find it helpful to start wrapping a little bit lower and then sliding the wrap up. That's your finished bud. And then we're going to go ahead and make one more bud. So same as the other bud, I'm adding glue about halfway up my first petal, and then kind of rolling the petal around itself and the wire, and then adding glue just to the base of the petal and slightly up each side, and then very loosely wrapping this petal around just so it's not as tight of a wrap. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and wrap about 2 inches of this wire with my stem wrap. All right, next we're going to go ahead and take our flowers, and we're going to wrap about 2 inches of this wire as well below the flower. Make sure you pull your little tail out so that it doesn't get wrapped in with the stem wire. Add some glue, and then go ahead and wrap. I'll repeat the same thing with my second flower here. All right, and now the glue is dry enough on these petals that we can pull them apart. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull the petals away from the center of the flower very gently. My glue's not quite all the way dry yet. Just go ahead and spread them out. The center petals should stay hugging the stamen and facing straight up, but all of the other petals can spread out. Okay, I'm going to grab my other flower, do the same. Next, we're going to go ahead and build our stem. So I have 5 flowers here. I'd say you need 5 to 7, and then I have 2 buds. So we're going to start with the buds and take some of our Cypress stem wrap. I like to make the stem wrap when I'm working with these smaller flowers a little bit thinner. So this is, I'd say, about 1/4 inch thick. It's less than 1/2 inch thick. So I'm going to start with my smaller bud that doesn't have the tail. I'm gonna add a little bit of glue to get this wrap going. I'm gonna go ahead and add my second bud, slightly lower than the first. You can kind of start arranging pulling the wires away from each other as you add. Make sure you're adding glue to the wire as you're wrapping. I'm gonna wrap about an inch, inch and a half down before I go ahead and add a flower. So I'm going to add my first flower here. I'm leaving about an inch of stem out. Go ahead and wrapping about an inch down, adding a little bit of glue. Go ahead and add a second flower. Don't worry too much about the placement of your flowers yet, as far as like what direction they face. We will kind of arrange those after they are all attached. So again, I wrap down about an inch, and I'm going to go ahead and add another flower. The last couple flowers that you add, you can add them so they are slightly closer together. So maybe only wrap half an inch down before adding your next flower for your last few. Larkspur stalks can also be very bushy and have a lot of flowers on them. So if you want, you can add a lot more flowers than I'm adding here. Alright, once I've added all my flowers, I'm going to go ahead and cut the end of my wires here so they're even, using some wire cutters. And I'm going to wrap the remaining length of my wires together. Again, make sure you're adding lots of glue as you wrap to hold everything. Once that stems are up, we can go ahead and kind of arrange the flowers. So I just like to make sure that the tail is kind of at the top of the flower, so you may need to twist some. And then just kind of bend the flower out so it arches away from the stem. I like to kind of bend my stem a little bit so it's not so straight. There's your stem of larkspur, and we're going to go ahead and make our stem of leaves now to go along with it. So for our leaves, you'll have 2 leaf halves, and we are going to glue a 12-inch 24 gauge wire in between the 2 leaf halves. Go ahead and add a little glue along one side of a leaf, placing the wire on top. And I'm going to go ahead and add some glue on top of that wire and the other half of the leaf on top of that. Okay, you're going to want at least 4 leaves per wire. The template includes a small leaf and then a slightly larger one. So to make the stem, I'm going to start with my small leaf. I'm going to add some glue here just below the leaf and wrap this wire with my stem wrap. I'm going to go ahead and wrap at least 2 inches down. Add a little bit more glue, and then I'm going to go ahead and add a second leaf. I'm going to add a small one, and this leaf is going to be, you're going to wrap right below the leaf on the wire, so there's not going to be any stem sticking out. I'm going to go ahead and add a third leaf. Continue wrapping, add a bit more glue, then we'll add our last leaf. I like to put the larger leaves down towards the bottom. So I'm going to add my large leaf last. Then I'm going to go ahead and cut all of these wires so they're even. When you're finished with the stem, we can go ahead and kind of bend our leaves out. Right, and then you can take your curling tool You can shape the leaves a bit. These leaves already have so much movement to them because of their shape. They don't need a whole lot of curling, but I think it does help so they don't look so flat. So I'm just curling some edges up, some down. Just give it lots of kind of wild movement. And then you have your nice stem of leaves to add to your larkspur. Thank you for crafting with me today.